Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, so I'm Gunjan Veda. I think I know most people here, but for those of you who don't know me, I am the Global Secretary of the Movement for Community-Led Development. And if any of you does not know what MCLD is, we are a majority world-led network of networks with over 2,000 local and community-based organizations from around the world and their INGO allies. The book launch for this, I want to welcome you on behalf of MCLD and my co-editor, Elene Cloete from Outreach International, also an MCLD member who is here. Interaction has very kindly offered us the space to meet in person, and John has very kindly arranged for reception, snacks and drinks afterwards for us in person. Those of you who are not in person, we will think about you as we enjoy the snacks and the drinks. This book launch, many of you probably know, was supposed to happen in January, right? 31st of January. We had it all planned for then. Elene had her tickets booked. And then the world around us changed, right? And since then, we've been thinking a lot about when to do it and how to do this and what to do. We had a virtual launch, but we also recognized and realized that at this time, when there is so much happening around us, what is it that gives us strength? What is it that gives us hope? And it is the community and the connections that we have created in the work that we do. So I know there are people here, even as they're looking for jobs, even as we are trying to see how do we keep up the work that we have been doing, we're still here because we lean into one another. And so today's book launch, for us, the theme is conversation, connection, and community, which are the three C's we think are very integral to community-led development. So we're not going to do this as a book launch. There is not going to be a panel discussion, even though I know the invite said there is a panel discussion. There is no panel discussions. And those of you who know me know I hate panels in any case. So I have something against that. What we're going to do is we're going to have a simple conversation where Elene and I will share a little bit about the journey of the book with you, what the book is. We have in the room with us some of the chapter authors. So John Kunrod is here. He's written a chapter on the practitioner's history of CLD. We have Matt here. Nuru International has a chapter. So then we're going to have a little bit, we're going to hear from them about their chapters. Why did they even decide to be a part of this? Clearly, they didn't have enough work going on, right? If you wanted to take on the book writing of a chapter, that means you don't have enough going on in your life. And then we are going to, I hope we are going to be joined by a very special guest. She's not here yet, but the founding member of MCLD Sierra Leone, Anne-Marie King. She is the founder of an organization called the Catania Women's Development Association in Sierra Leone. And she happens to be in DC right now. And she was going to be here and do a reading from a chapter on Sierra Leone from the book. So I'm hoping that she is still going to find her way here. And we will have the book reading. And then, because we believe in communities, and we believe that everybody carries knowledge and experiences, Elene and I have no answers, so we are not going to do a Q&A. What we're going to do is conversation cycles. So after the whole thing is done, the discussions and the sharing, for those of us in the room, will encourage you to find people who you may not know, find one of the authors or people who are involved in the book, and just talk about CLD, about what community means, what does connection mean at a time like this, and how do we take this forward. That's what we're going to do today. And then again, for those in the room, we're going to have a special book signing. We'll pass a copy of this book around and ask everybody who is here to sign it for us. So, yeah. Did you think we were signing copies? No.
And you are signing copies.
Well, yeah, those are different copies. But this copy, my copy, we're going to pass it around to all of you to sign. Again, as a reminder to all of us, we look at it. And for me, every time I look at the book of the community we have, not just in the communities that we work, but here and in the different places that we are in. So we'll have that going, and then we'll go into the reception. That's the plan for today. All right. Elene, welcome to DC. Elene's not from DC. She doesn't live in DC. Like I said, she was going to be here in January, and then things changed. But now you're finally here, and the book is finally here.
I am. And the book is finally here.
How does it feel?
Yeah, it's been a great journey, and it feels very good. And, you know, Gunjan, as you were talking about community and connections and collaboration, a book always feels like, I think, such a final thing. But what this event is showing and what continuous conversations have shown is it can also be a conversation starter. You know, it's sort of the project is done. Everybody's saying, are you glad the project is over? Are you good? Do you feel good that the book is now published? And then I think, yes, I do. But I'm also now super excited about how it opens up new conversations, you know, and how it can start us thinking about the future that we build from here onward, right? And I think it's very much summarized in what we did in that particular volume. Yeah. So feeling good, Gunjan.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think the book came out, right, from conversations like this. Yeah. It essentially came out because we didn't want to lose touch with the connections we had created in the course of our work.
Yeah.
And part of it was just like, how do we keep it all, right? You remember, Elene?
And I think it all started, so just a kind of a background for everybody. In 2018, 2019, Gunjan had already started and you led a working group, or you started doing
the collaborative research team
with the MCLD. And then I joined in 2020 with the group. And I think it came from that place. I was reflecting a little bit, why did I join from my organization standpoint? And I think it came from this point of, you know, we as at that time, maybe things have changed now, but as smaller INGOs doing community development, which at that time felt like something that's a little bit outside the norm, you know, I think a lot of times there's a little bit of a feeling of isolation. And then we heard about the movement for community development, and then I joined initial conversations with you and John, and it felt like you find your community, you know, it's sort of you with the people that talk and understand when you talk in a particular way about development. And that's how I then joined. And then I got the invitation to join the working groups. And that's where we then started to ask really, really engaging questions around, okay, we are all representing community development and we say we are doing community development, but what do we actually mean when we say that? You know, we are using these words interchangeably, but what do we actually mean by it? And I think then a beautiful goal of the working group was then to say, okay, let's find some common ground. Let's build a definition. Let's do a little bit of a landscape review of who's doing what where. Let's bring all of that research together. And then that's what the working group did. It then evolved into a tool that was developed. And we felt very good at that point about that work. And that was around 2022. 2021.
January 21, we released the tool.
There we go.
My life changed after that. So I know that I have a before.
And it wasn't a little review.
It was a big one. It was
big review.
All right. Well, okay. After Gunjan's life changed, we had some more conversations. And then the thing was, well, Gunjan, I don't think the work is done. Because we have these tools and we have a definition and we have dimensions when we talk about community development. We have these different languages that we now can start using and concepts that we can start using talking about the work. But still, there's a gap in what we actually mean by it. So what does it look like? How does it work in practice? What are examples of this work? And we started looking, you know, you do your literature review and you realize, well, there's work here and there where people are writing about what community development looks like in practice. There are case studies here and there are case studies there, but maybe then we need to do a little bit more of that work. Maybe we need to dig a little bit deeper and search for those examples. There was that beautiful book that was written about Tostan Ben Chikagli, I think.
Just lovely.
There we go. And that was such a wonderful example. And I think I said to you, Gunjan, shouldn't we look for more examples like this? And let's see if we can find them and put them into a volume. That we can share a little bit wider.
Yeah, I mean, part of the thing was also about who tells these stories. So it's not just how it's done, but who talks about how it's done, right? And that was what we wanted to do, that could there be a volume where the practitioners talk about it and share, because as a practitioner, we know that,
Mhm.
yeah, there are all these great things and values we talk about, but when it actually comes to implementing them, it's tough. And there are challenges and there's pushback. And, just when you think you've gotten it, you realize, oh my God, but we were not being inclusive. Oh my God, we thought we were being really participatory. Clearly, we were not. Right. So there was all of this. So what's that journey like? But I will confess, I mean, for me, it was the reason when Elene first came up with the book idea, and I was like, yes, let's do it. It was also just because of that community that we had created in that collaborative working group, which had become my go-to community. Every time we needed something, we needed thought partnership, we had to figure something out. And I wasn't ready to let go of that. Right. So this was just a way of keeping it going just a little bit longer, hanging on to it. And I think over the years we've done that, right?
Yeah.
The craziest days where we kind of don't know what's happening in the world around us, right? And it feels very often, even before January, I would say, just if you look at the news, the doom, the gloom, and everything that we see with the wars and everything,
Mhm.
it can be very frustrating, very depressing, very lonely, and sometimes really like, how are we going to move the needle here? Like, what are we even doing? I think in those moments, this community was where I went to for strength.
Mhm.
And I would just be like, Elene, I don't know what's going on.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think it was a lot of that, but then it was also a way to. We talked about the tools, and I don't know how many people here are on the call, but if you have been on MCLD calls, you've probably heard of the participatory CLD assessment tool, right? I promise you, I'm not obsessed with it. I think our members would argue that I don't talk about it as often as I have to. And I always get this when we are talking about anything, and it's like, yeah, the tool. And I go like, oh yeah, the tool. Right. Um, but this tool came out in January 2021, and it was a learning focused tool on how do you do community-led development. As Aline said, we were practitioners. We realized we are all talking and saying we're doing community-led development, and yet we had no common understanding of what it was. And when we asked people, it was very interesting at the beginning when we said to them, give us evaluation reports for your CLD projects. They said, yeah, but how would you define CLD? Tell us. Like, you tell us, you say you're doing CLD, shouldn't you know? And the answer was, not really, right? And so the tool came out because after 2.5 years, right? It was 100 people, 2.5 years, consultations, literature reviews, just conversations. Again, I love to talk, so you can imagine conversation is like a favorite thing here. Um, and out of that, there were 9 dimensions that emerged, which we realized it didn't matter whether you were a local government, whether you were, a small community-based organization, a big INGO, it didn't matter what your size was, what part of the world you were working in. There seemed to be certain underlying values and characteristics and processes that seemed to work. And those, we brought them down to 9. And because we said this is not a panel, so we're not showing you a slide on the screen, which we probably should have, but those 9 dimensions: participation, inclusion, voice, accountability, local resources and knowledge, sustainability, um, responsiveness to context, working with subnational governments, a government civil society collaboration. Yes, important, even at a time like this. Um, Collaboration, and then the 2 processes: facilitation and monitoring and evaluation, which is aligned with community-led development values, right? And we kind of realized that it didn't matter the size of the program or the organization or the place. So in the book, we have from Latin America to Asia to Africa. We don't have anybody from Oceania, but otherwise we have organizations from different parts, and these characteristics seem to be common. So that wasn't the tool. So the book, for the first time, this tool, which is available now in 10 languages being used in different parts of the world, we actually have that tool in the book as an appendix. So it's there. But it was also, we realized it became like a natural framing for us when we were speaking of CLD.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting, Elene, remember when we got the different authors in, because the authors are not people who are from the movement, all of them. Some are not,
Mm-hmm.
or were not people who knew the framing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the idea was, okay, we use this as a framework and we get different authors to use their experiences, references to their organizations, for example, and then unpack a little bit these different dimensions within their chapter. And, it worked. But I think one thing that often came out during those conversations, Matt, maybe you could remember that too, is organizations would say, well, for example, well, yes, I can write to accountability and I can describe the work that we do in terms of accountability, but there are other things that happen too, right? You can't just talk about accountability, which is one dimension, and not talk about participation, inclusion, and voice. You can't talk about accountability, but then not talk about collaboration, right? And that then became such an interesting thing to work around in the shaping and the development of the chapters. I think, Matt, we had a lot of conversations around that too, right? Because your chapter was around accountability.
I think I gave you a hard time. Yeah.
On that. And that was a beautiful moment showing how intertwined all of these dimensions are. And then we wanted to still have that as a framework for the book. And so that's how the book is structured. Then Gunjan and I had the wonderful experience in finding and looking for people and asking, inviting people to join in on the project with these different dimensions in mind, reaching out. And there was a lot of intentionality also in doing that, right, Gunjan? Because we wanted to involve organizations that we have a lot of respect for, like Nuru, for example. We wanted to involve organizations of different scale, and we wanted to involve programming at a different scale to illustrate, that CLD could work on different levels. But we also wanted to be very intentional in incorporating and including voices, right, that represent different sectors of the work, that represent different contexts and different spaces. And so we wanted to incorporate academic voices, we wanted to incorporate practitioner voices, and even geographers, people who are sort of on the side, for lack of a better word, but then could also give that kind of view of the work taking place. And that was a wonderful journey. To incorporate all of those voices into the mix. And then also the context, right? And also geographically, to make sure that we are representative across all the spaces. And sorry, let me just quickly add this thing that I'm remembering about. There was also intentionality on including context from the majority world. Gunjan, and we just this morning had the same discussion again, community-led development, locally led development happens everywhere. You always, I think when we think about it, we want to think about majority contexts and majority spaces, majority world spaces, but we have domestic examples of community-led development that happens very, very beautifully too. And so we had to make that decision. Are we going to incorporate chapters and authors that represent local domestic spaces, because we know of wonderful examples out of different areas, or are we for now maybe just going to focus on majority world contexts to consider scope of the work? And that's where we landed.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, as Elene said, community-led development happens in communities. Communities are all over the world. They are in the US, they are in Europe, they are in different parts of the world. And
And local is also
And local is local to where you are,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's not a majority world thing, but
Mhm.
we decided very intentionally to focus on the majority world because we also felt like those were the stories that we really do not hear about. And we wanted to make sure again that there was an opportunity for community leaders, majority world leaders to do that. So we have chapters in the book. I remember the One Village Partners chapter, the Sierra Leone chapter,
Mhm.
where one of the authors is actually a community leader. Oh, and Anne-Marie is here. We haven't met in person. So I was like, I know you were going to be here. I talked about you before you came in, but I didn't recognize you. So I'm glad you're here. So the chapter author is actually a community leader. One of the community leaders is a chapter author, right? Which was the other thing we really wanted to do. I remember when the book, we first went to Routledge to publish the book, and Routledge was like, yes, this is fascinating, great, and all of that. Just make sure all your authors are PhDs because Routledge only publishes PhDs, right? And we were like, great, they're all PhDs in life. Surely that's the most important one, right? But they did agree, right? And so that's how we could have a community leader authoring a chapter in the book, which again for us was important as we were doing this. But you know, Elene, as you were talking about the diversity and bringing people together, I come from India. In case it wasn't obvious, uh, I'm sure it's very surprising. We have a dish in India called khichdi, and khichdi is what emerges when you mix everything into a pot, right? So you put whatever you have available in the house. You have rice and you have lentils, but then you put whatever you have in the house, whatever veggies, this and that, you put it into the pot and you cook it together. And it's supposed to be super nutritious because it's a mix of all of these things, right? It's soothing, it's easy, and it's something which is a go-to thing for us. And to me, the book is almost like that khichdi, wherein we pull together these different experiences, resources, knowledge from different parts of the world, put it all together, and this is what emerged out of it, right? Um, which in today's day and age, right, when there's increasingly we're moving into silos in our world, it's so important to remember the importance of this connection, the interconnectedness, and the community that we have, which is important to sustain ourselves, because that's what energizes us, right, in those moments. But before we move to our authors, last thing, what's your, and this is an insane question to ask, I know, but it's like asking a parent, what's your favorite, who's your favorite child, right? But anything from the book, any memory, anything that comes to mind, anecdote that you want to share?
Mhm. Um, I think I think Matt reminded me just in the moment of some of that. So we worked closely between Gunjan and I as editors. We worked on certain chapters in a closer relationship than others, and then we mixed out a little bit. And I think those were for me the favorite moments. You know, that interaction with the authors, and understanding and learning so much about the work that they are doing. And then also reflecting that against your own work and what you have seen also in the organization that you work, right? And then recognizing the similarities, right? And seeing, yeah, that's also that happens with us. And then and starting to connect and make all the, that thing when you were little and there were numbers in a coloring book and you had to connect, or what's that called again?
Connect the dots.
Connect the dots, that one. And so that happened for me so much through working on the book and working so closely then with the authors and learning about them and their worldviews and how they view the world, not only through their organizations and through the work, but also through their personal experiences and their personal lenses. That was great. How about you?
So I was looking at the screen because I actually wanted to see if we have any of our authors, chapter authors here. And we don't have them in the room, but we have Charlie from Roots of Development, which is one of the chapters in the book. And again, I think to me, what is amazing, right, is that when you don't have a standard format for anything, just diversity that emerges. So that chapter, which is It's about two organizations, and it's a conversation between two people. So it's a story told in two voices. The voice of Chad, who's the founder of Roots of Development, which is a US-based organization, right? And Raison, which is an Haitian organization, and Robbie, uh, who is, who leads that, right? And just the conversation, the same story, the two perspectives on that same story, on how it unfolds. To me, like that was beautiful when you had all these Haitian metaphors and story and that worldview coming together with the American worldview, right? And how they came together and how they figured out a way to work together, which was a partnership, which wasn't one saying what the other should be doing, which is how technically it is in our sector for the most part, right? So we have that, which is like a dialogue. It's like two people conversation. And then we have something, the stories like Nen, which is like autoethnographic, which is an author going through their story and talking about it. We have the geography chapter with Ida, talking about GIS and how that was used. So just the variety of it for me it was fascinating to see that when we allow for that to happen, right? When we allow ourselves to not set very hard frames and boxes and try to put people in that. I know we all love tidy little boxes or neat little shelves, all labeled so that we know what to pick out, when to see it. But when we actually don't do that and let people come in as they want to with what they have and what they bring in, there's just so much in it that comes out. But I think that's a lot of us talking, Elene.
Yeah.
Why don't we hear a little bit? We could not, of course, bring a lot of our authors, the majority world authors here, but we do have some of their voices with us. So we're going to have a little video to give you, so that you can meet some of them and hear from them. So Sarah, and I'm going to get out of the way. When you bring together a diverse group of people and pool together their knowledge, their experiences, their learnings, that is what our world needs right now, because no one player or part of the system can actually bring about the transformational changes we are talking about. It requires each one of us. And that is what the book showcases to me, that if we are able to really build on our individual strengths in a collective manner, we can do it.
Our quest and the quest for community-led development was seen by
Take one and I'll
always as a movement for liberation, as a movement to end colonialism. It's not just a better way to do development.
What we have learned over the years is actually getting ourselves engaged with communities in a different way that build spaces so that they themselves can use their own voice. Community-led development interventions that are adaptable, flexible, and thrive on equity, consensus, and partnership actually empower the community.
Successful projects, they don't look the same. Like when the program seems to be more successful was when the communities took the program and rearranged it in the way that it works for the communities.
Within each of our communities, there's someone who has expertise. But unfortunately, most of these structures usually work in silos. How do you leverage the power within the communities? We know it is there, and that is what our chapter directly feeds into us.
We look at the network in Benin, asking everyone, are you really happy with the way we are implementing developments? If you are not satisfied with just one single aspect, you are welcome to MCLD.
There is a need for mutual respect. You need to sort of have equity and pluralism embedded in your approach. Then give priority to the empowering process over the efficient approach. NGOs and project managers love efficiency and sacrifice empowerment at the altar of efficiency. And this says that to create good community organization, empowering is more important than efficiency.
It just so happened that Engineers Without Borders was looking for someone like me to do a project in Guatemala. You know, they wanted to essentially do community-led development, and I was essentially the facilitator for all of this. And I think part of my message is, you know, constant adjustment, more time, and development organizations of whatever size and shape usually don't plan that. The best development is not constricted or constrained by such limitations.
ABCD, or asset-based citizen-led development, addresses the internalized powerlessness and dependency of community members. Realize that they have assets, strengths, and capabilities valuable to their own well-being and the well-being of the whole community.
We were dedicated and committed to community-led development from the beginning. But what we did not realize is the depth of dynamics between the international and the local. Our chapter is about that journey. We wrap up by explaining when we did move out of the way, the successes and progress were enormous.
I thought the constellation SALT approach would work really well. And here we are using it with 12 NGOs in South Asia. So the NGOs are assessing their own progress. And our role is to trust the capacity of people, deeply listen, appreciate, and learn from their experience.
We try to narrate the story of Sarvodaya, its vision, its philosophy, its approach, the model and everything, and to emphasize the spirit of transformation, which is exemplified by the theme that we used. We build the road builds us, because we try to achieve a physical objective, but in the process, we transform ourselves spiritually and based on our values.
If you have an idea, and you seek out folk with energy, with like-minded energy toward establishing something, you can get things done. It's just possibility. And this for me is just the beginning of such possibilities.
You come here now. Yeah. Good of you.
Oh, okay.
So as Gunjan said, it's so wonderful to have authors with us. And Matt, thank you so much for being here. And also Ian, your colleague from Muru. And then of course, John, for you to also be with us. I want to ask you the first question. I want you to share a little bit why you said yes when we invited you. I think we incorporated in the last chapter of the book, we reflect a little bit on how all the authors that we connected with and invited, all of them just immediately say, of course, yes, this sounds great, you know, and which just showed the energy and the enthusiasm toward this work. But want to hear directly from you. So why did you agree, and what made you excited about collaborating on this project? Maybe John, you first.
You know, I learned about community-led development from people who had gone to prison with Mahatma Gandhi and people that they inspired who their governments tried to assassinate, and then people they inspired. And a lot of my career was just listening to them and then telling other people about what they did. And so the chance to write the history of community-led development, which was my chapter, was something that I was dying to do. And this gave me the chance. And it forced me to actually fact check what the stories that I've been telling. And you know, Rutledge, they have been, well, what more footnotes? They wanted more footnotes. But really, I had gotten triggered around that because I was so frustrated. So, you know, one of my responsibilities when my office was in New York was bringing in interns. And these interns would come in and I would kind of ask them what they had read, who they had read. And they were kind of, their mindset was that Jeffrey Sachs invented development.
Yeah.
And that is so not the truth. And no, they hadn't read Gandhi. No, they hadn't read Jimmy Yen. No, they hadn't read Paulo Freire. They hadn't read any of the majority world creators of the kind of the post-colonial revolution that community-led development was built on. And so, yeah, I was really eager to get that down in a finite number of pages. And I used up a few more than you need.
And yes, thank you so much for that. And I just quickly want to add to what John was saying. The magic of your chapter, John, is exactly that, right? Bringing into the conversation those parts of history that are often not considered, right, and not incorporated into the curriculum for students that learn about international development. Those kinds of really important role players that set the ball going around community organizing in the majority world contexts, you know, and so on and so forth. So that's the first thing. And I think another thing that's so valuable about your chapter is then also illustrating through these really, really powerful examples that community development is not a new thing.
But it basically started with the end of the Ice Age.
You know,
when settled agriculture,
yeah,
you know, communities stopped wandering and hunting and gathering and actually started developing their communities.
Yeah, exactly. And that I think is such a really, really valuable part of your chapter. So thank you. How about you, Matt?
So hi, I'm Matt Laniel from NIBRU. So I was in university and read Jeffrey Sachs, and I learned about community-led development from John Coonrod. And so across Connecticut Avenue here at FHI 360 and then PACT, we were part of Locust Coalition. And back then, I've been with NIBRU for 14 years now. Back then, I thought I was doing local leadership and community-led development before it was cool. That's how I thought about things. And now I've been around long enough to realize how much I didn't know and how much of this work has nothing to do with me. That this definition of leadership, and we just had a long email exchange this week. Way too long on my part, where I talked about redefining leadership, that it's not about me assessing somebody else's capacity strengthening. It's not about quantifying that impact. What I've come to realize is that I can't even imagine the things that somebody else is going to do, and that if I can have some small role in serving others to do things I won't even be able to contemplate, that's the definition of leadership. So that didn't help measure anything in a quantifiable way, but that's okay. Maybe life is just that complex. So that's what really drew me to this chapter, and co-authoring it with half dozen NIBRU colleagues in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Nigeria, and the US who aren't here today.
Yep. And so, as mentioned earlier, I mean, I'm so glad you bring up leadership, because I think leadership, and then the dimension that is reflected through your chapter is accountability, and leadership plays into that so strongly, right? That collective leadership and how that plays out in forms of accountability, multi-directional accountability. And Matt and his colleagues' chapter was amazing to work and to see how that chapter evolved, Matt, because I remember so vividly. I would say, Matt, what do you think, Matt and colleagues, what do you think about this component that reflects the work done in Nigeria? And then your response would be, I'll hear from my colleagues in Nigeria, right? And it's that whole thing of just the process of seeing your chapter evolve, was a manifestation of inclusion and voice, you know, and participation, and that it was that collaboration that shaped your chapter and also other chapters in the book too. So it was a wonderful journey to see and to be part of. I have a second question, and the second question is kind of linked to the journey of writing. I know many of you are authors, and you know, they always say as soon as you start writing, that's actually the beginning of the process. You know, as you write, you start to learn and uncover so many additional things, and that's the writing process. And when the chapter or the work is done, you have gone through so many evolutions in formulating that product at the end of the day. So when you reflect back at that writing process, what are sort of moments that really came or come to mind for you from a reflective standpoint? Maybe John, we can start with you.
So yeah, so the fact checking and footnote digging was really, I just loved the additional research that I needed to do. And my favorite part was actually learning more about how community-led development came to Burkina Faso. And the role that the Swiss government played in that, or the Swiss government representative. I mean, as long as that particular individual was there, the Swiss government was really able to mobilize it as a bilateral, serious money into a very, very pure form of community-led development. And this bilateral officer literally would, he would spend a lot of time just sitting in other people's planning meetings, and keeping his mouth shut. It was just learning that I had kind of had a glimpse of that because a friend of mine who took me to Burkina Faso the first time had worked for the Swiss government, and he had told me about this fellow. I never got to meet him. An awful lot of the people who inspire me are now no more. But they just getting a more vivid picture of how a funder can be an authentic partner in the process of community-led development, which is mentioned earlier is tough. But that example from the success in actually more than just Burkina Faso, but that's where I witnessed success working, and that was learning that was a great part of the journey for me.
Amazing, that's great. How about you, Matt?
Yeah, for me, writing a chapter on accountability, which we talked about, was an evolving kind of idea. I'm really passionate about geography and leadership and so many things. And so to come to accountability, I had a hard time getting my head around it. Like, I've been working with my chapter co-authors for 11 years, 8 years, 7 years, respectively, with a half dozen co-authors on the chapter. So these are people I've worked with a really long time. The aha moment for me was realizing how complex our relationships had gotten, and that in that complexity was the maturation of that relationship. That's what brought it to the next level. So the fact that my Kenyan colleague and counterpart who runs Nuru Kenya, we've been working together for 11 years, and we co-authored this chapter together. And our relationship had gotten so complex over the years, where we're working together on every week. She's serving on boards. She's on boards that I'm not on. And so the lines of responsibility had gotten so meshed. But that was the strength of the relationship, was that things had gotten so complex. That's what made it strong, and that we were accountable to one another, and that it doesn't run one way and it doesn't run one direction. And in fact, it's that what that makes those relationships strong is them getting very dense.
Yeah, right. Well, I think there are so much more that we can talk about little chapters and also the other chapters in the book as well. And it's unfortunate that we don't have the other authors here to join us. But as you know, the wonderful things that came out of the book and the learning processes is for both Gunjan and me, part of the process and part of the beauty of the project. I think we have to now move on to an Aga Khan video. Yes. So Aga Khan, thank you so much, John and Matt. So the Aga Khan Foundation also contributed a chapter to the volume. The author of the chapter is Matthew Reeves. And we will have the opportunity to also do a book launch together with Aga Khan Foundation later this week in London. And they have created for us a video, which we are very excited to share with you on the reflection on their chapter.
Our current rural support program is working in Gilgit-Baltistan and Chitral. It's mainly mountainous area with high peaks and glaciers. Due to its specific location, area is also vulnerable to climate challenges.
Development work in Syria faces many challenges, most notably the Syrian crisis and the climate change. This is in addition to security risk, the spread of war remnants, and the fragility of the social fabric.
Of course, we also experience some challenges, especially when it comes to resources, because that is still something that most of these organizations and the communities are still struggling. It is just about how do we have sustainable resources to be able to continue these programs.
As cidades com as quais nós trabalhamos estão localizadas sobretudo na periferia. Isto significa que estão longe dos centros urbanos e, por norma, têm um acesso muito mais limitado a uma variedade de recursos e, por consequência, também de direitos.
Despite these challenges, community have some potentials also. One of the biggest potential is that community knows the rules of participatory development, and they are ready to do partnership in all programs and interventions. Also, they have will to improve their lives. There are a number of community organizations varying from VOs, WOs to LSOs and other civil society organizations, which are strong forums for decision making and community participation.
Eu acho que uma das forças, se não a força principal que eu tenho encontrado é a resiliência. Ou seja, uma capacidade de olhar o desafio e de o superar com uma energia e uma força sem igual. Estamos a falar de pessoas que têm uma resistência, que têm uma capacidade de superação diária. O que eu considero que é essencial para o desenvolvimento comunitário neste contexto, acho que são duas dimensões. Uma é a relação, ou seja, a relação que conseguimos estabelecer com as pessoas, que importa ser sempre uma relação de proximidade e daí de confiança. E a outra dimensão tem a ver com a estratégia, com a metodologia, ou seja, a transformação, a mudança não acontece só por vontade, tem de acontecer porque é inspirada naquilo que as pessoas querem e porque tem um plano e tem uma consequência, tem etapas.
I believe community participation in all stages of project development is necessary and important to success of the program. We engage communities in identifying their problems, designing programs for themselves, and then they are partners in implementing those programs and projects, and they also do the monitoring after completion of the programs. So basically, it's important that communities are involved in all stages of project cycle. It is also important for sustainability of the program.
We also look at things to do with self-reliance, because we don't want to do programs when we go, there's nothing that is happening. We want to see sustainability. And I think when you talk about that, we have actually seen the many programs, the trainings that we have done, the capacity building that creates that self-reliance, something that we're very, very, very proud of as an organization. So we look at this partnership, effective partnership and collaborations that we do with organizations are actually key to the community-led development.
Launching development efforts require building the capacity of relevant institutions and individuals, which Syrian society has lost over the past 14 years, exploring our available resources, developing plans accordingly, and engaging all communities in the planning and implementation of development projects are essential pillars of community-led development. Providing funding is also crucial. Community-led development should be comprehensive and integrated, taking into account all Syrians, especially marginalized groups. Ensuring that all voices are heard contributes to the adoption of community-led development mechanism and contributes to finding more equitable and suitable solutions.
Inclusion, creating a safe space for people to be able to openly share and contribute to the discussions.
Promoting solidarity and pluralism contributes to creating more resilient societies capable of responding to the growing humanitarian needs. Transparency and accountability contributes to strengthening trust among all partners or various partners and ensure that development processes are moving in the right direction.
O primeiro de todos é o pluralismo e, portanto, é perceber que mudança é que toda a gente quer ver acontecer. E esta promoção de encontros improváveis, de pessoas que no cotidiano não se dão, de pessoas que não se conhecem, de pessoas que têm medo umas das outras. O segundo tem a ver com a participação, e a participação é não só esta dinâmica da escuta ativa, não é? E de nós percebermos o que é que as pessoas querem, como entregar e trabalhar as ferramentas que fazem com que as pessoas tracem os planos.
I am inspired by the role of the communities they played in overall development, especially in community organizations where they come together and develop their programs and implement their programs. I'm also inspired by the role played by the community leaders to improve the quality of life of the people living in the area.
In most of our programs that we've done, we have seen the community being so much involved and owning up this program, especially from the local leaders and very strong leadership from the grassroots. That has really contributed to this sustainable development programs that we have seen within our communities.
Ensuring a prosperous future for all Syrians, for children, women, youth, and for elderly has been and will remain a top priority to me. And it inspires me to push community development forward. Syrians deserve to live in dignity and prosperity.
Each of our chapters, if you look at the book, talks about one of those dimensions, right? And so just with this, we hope you got a little bit of the flavor of the different types of work. So Aga Khan's chapter was very interesting because they talked about how they were doing all of this work in Afghanistan and Pakistan, right? And in India, and they thought they had cracked it. They knew how to do community-led development. And then they went to Kenya. And they realized they didn't, right? And then they went to Egypt, and then they realized, oops, we have to change. And then after all of this, they went to Portugal, right? So actually, the only minority world context that we actually have their work in the book. And again, it was different. So it's again about every chapter tries to touch on something very practical that, okay, if you are a big organization and you're in multiple countries, can you just crack it? And apparently, there are commonalities, but you can't, right? But now we do have Anne-Marie King here. As I said, she is the founder and director of the Catania Women's Development Association from Sierra Leone. She is also a founding member of MCLD Sierra Leone. So we are very, very, very thrilled that she is actually in DC right now. And she is going to read to us an excerpt from the Sierra Leone chapter of the book.
And she'll need to come
Yes,
in the middle of the room.
This is for you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm really grateful to be here this afternoon on behalf of Africa and Sierra Leone in particular. And I want you to know that MCLD or CLD, we are not wasting time. We are working, and the work is making an impact. And I just have an extract because we have seen, of course, all what we have seen is happening in our own communities as well. And as I said, Reverend Anne-Marie King, I'm one of the first founding member of CLD Sierra Leone. But today we have many people joined because of the procedures, because of the methods. And so really it's even going to the government, many people have interest. The thinking place, if you go to the book, is there. Philomen Senese's home is Gima, a village carved out of the thick forest of eastern Sierra Leone. His ancestors began the community. It was my grandfathers and friends who found that spot when they were hunting. They had it as a spot to rest, and they realized that it would be a good space to start a community. They sat and thought about what to call this new village. After some time, one of them said, "We have sat and thought about the name for this place for so long. Let's just call it the thinking place." And that's how it has the name in Mende, one of our languages. Gilima, shortened to Grima. Grima is on a hilltop and its peaceful setting makes it a place to come together and think. At this time, Sierra Leone was a British colony. As the years went on, despite its tranquil isolation, despite the turmoil of both colonialization and post-colonial conflict affected this village, Grima. Like many rural communities, was practically demolished during the Civil War in the 1990s. As the community rebuilt, NGOs came in with projects to provide basic needs, but without much consultation with the community. Each time, the NGO told the community what the project was and asked for their inputs. Mud bricks. At first, they used to go there. They ask nothing. They will only tell them what to do. But this time around, they try to ask the community members to be included in the projects. We are never that we are prioritized at first. It is not the priority for the communities. It is what the project, the donor wants. But we accepted the help eventually because the people needed it. So they accepted it, whether it is what they desire or not. In 2010, a local politician funded what the community wanted, a safe place for women to give birth. The clinic was built of packed mud bricks with cement plaster, which was exactly a comfortable environment. Moigua Fatmata was the first nurse officially stationed in Grima, and she quickly became aware of the challenges. At the time I moved there, Grima was very remote, and it wasn't easy to live there. The community is isolated. The community's isolations meant that goods and services were difficult to attain, much less electricity and running water, and women were affected most by the lack of resources. The health of pregnant women and mothers with newborns was not good, Fatmata shared. I do a life-saving job. Imagine it's late. I had no lights, and there were 3 pregnant women in the labor room waiting for my service. There was no space to accommodate all of them. It was hard for me to do my job well. Under such conditions, I felt so bad and was worried. Why do maternal health challenges persist despite all the aid intended to prop up healthcare system like Grima's clinic? The answers to these questions have led to endless debates, but in the immediate term, people in Grima live with this tragedy. Ineffective aid has left communities feeling as though projects meant to benefit them are not theirs. When drinking water well was constructed in Grima, people refer to it by the name of the NGO that built it because the people were not involved. People didn't feel like there was a place for them to make any decision on projects, shared Moegua Bokari. Another community member from Grima, humanitarian imperialism and the social glue. Grima's multi-dimensional poverty is rooted in Sierra Leone's unique modern history. Sierra Leone was colonized for charitable purposes. The settlement of Freetown was established as a community for formerly enslaved people from the Americas in the 1790s, with support from British charity and facilitated by the British Empire. The colony was an early form of humanitarian imperialism, where humanitarian rhetoric was used to justify war and empire building. Brick month 2006. Colonialism also manifested through indirect rule that favored inequality and rigid hierarchies in the colony, Jones 2020. Indirect rule rehabs and reshaped African societies by force to the economic benefits of the British Empire, where rules and social orders were dictated to the colonies from afar. Once the Freetown colony began, it conquered the indigenous communities surrounding the settlements, colonizers, the humanists, indigenous communities in pursuit of resources, which often involve full-scale warfares. Okay, 2017. Eventually, the United Kingdom gave Sierra Leone fragile, and within 30 years, Sierra Leone descended into a civil war that was as brutal and dehumanizing as anything, affecting women mostly. Anything in the societies in this new nation had experienced. Sierra Leone's interwoven history of charity, the humanizing forces of the British Empire, and the conquering and destruction of indigenous societies have implications for how services and economic development are delivered in Sierra Leone today. This is the first time anyone has asked us what we want through CLD. Is that not great? From colonial times.
Yes.
Yes. In 2015, One Village Partners, that is the chair for CLD Sierra Leone, began a CLD program in Grima. Philemon Maxenesi was one of the 12 volunteers, change agents, who joined the program. One Village Partner trained in public speaking, meeting facilitation, and participatory tools that will assist the community in identifying their development needs. One Village Partners staff and the change agents consulted with the community for the first time on their development needs and vision for the future. On the final day of the consultation, more than 100 people gathered in the village square to participate in voting for their development priorities. Philemon led the community in publicly selecting what needed to be addressed. As the voting unfolded, the community whose two top priorities were education and public health. The boisterous event suddenly shifted in mood. The traditional women's leader called the women present to join her outside for a discussion. They went outside for a discussion. A serious conversation began on which immediate needs members will choose, education or public health. One woman spoke of the deplorable physical condition of the school, the primary school building. Another spoke about how health could mean something everyone needed, like water or sanitation. We were there as one village partners, representatives, but we knew this discussion was not about us, and it wasn't for us. Even those of us who spoke Mende, the indigenous language in the area, stayed outside the huddle. The women quickly reached a consensus. They dispersed and informed the men what they would be voting for. Traditionally, men make decisions in Sierra Leone, but with NCLD, women are now. Yes. So we did not anticipate that gender hierarchies would be shifted in our CLD model. Both explicitly and quickly, we call vote again, and like a wave of humanity, hands shot up, establishing public health as the community priority. Suddenly the mood shifted again. This time it was ecstatic. Someone brought out a pair of drums and everyone there erupted into dance. When we had a chance, we asked Philemon why everyone was this happy. We have had 7 NGOs do projects here. He said, this is the first time anyone has asked us what we want. Then he went on dancing. So this is the extra.
Thank you so much, Anne-Marie. Thank you for sharing from, these are different excerpts from the chapter on Sierra Leone. And we are so fortunate that we had somebody from Sierra Leone who could read that and share it with us. So with that, we are going to, as I said at the beginning, we didn't plan this as a panel discussion. We didn't plan this as a Q&A because we don't think Elene and I have all the answers or any of the answers. We do think that between ourselves, there is so much of richness of experience that we can share experiences. We can deepen those connections, lean into them, start a few more interesting conversations, maybe resulting in more books, resulting in more shared initiatives, resulting in spaces that allow us to really strengthen our solidarity, because in this time, that is what we need. We need to know that there is a community that we are a part of, that there is a greater cause, and that no matter what is happening, that change continues to happen, right? There is momentum. Sometimes it becomes difficult to see it. Sometimes it becomes difficult to feel it when you're far away and you only have news channels around you and we see the everyday reality unfolding around us. But there is hope, there is change, and there is a different way of thinking that is unfolding and taking place around the world. And these spaces allow us to do that. They allow us to experience that and to experience the hope that comes with it. Because as my mentor, Kamla Bhasin, used to say, hope is the biggest form of resistance that we can have. So we really invite everybody to go into conversation cycles here in the room, find somebody you haven't met, and talk about this. Talk about the community we are, the connections we can have, and how do we take this forward together. Thank you so much to our online participants. I see Holta there. I want to do a special shout out because the book, the tool that we talked about at the beginning, she was leading the scoping group that actually created the tool. So Holta, I don't know if you can come on camera, but.
Hey, Holta.
So, but thank you for joining us. We will, for those in the room, we will, circulate the book. Please sign it for us. We would love to have your signature on the book. There are copies of the book available there. Again, sorry for the online folks, but for people in the room, we do have reception and some time for us to come together. But thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing this moment with us and for creating this community for us. Oh.
Thank you, Janine and Gail. Shout out